Pretty cool because it means that we're getting maybe a little bit of a break from school next week. Maybe, hopefully. I know. If you're doing online school is not the funnest way to do school. So a break is probably nice. And we always get a break with Shabbat, right? So Shabbat's our little built in break for that too. So Fast Friday Shabbat. So we'll have our Shabbat part of things and story and some music. I had to make sure I had my wooden Shabbat set so that we could actually do our Shabbat. And we're also coming up on Hanukkah soon, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about Hanukkah, but maybe not. So we'll go ahead and get started. We've done lots and lots and lots of different versions of Hine Matov to welcome each other, but since it's Shabbat, I thought maybe this time we would just do Bim Bam Shabbat Shalom, which might make it a little bit easier to kind of settle into the idea that, yeah, actually Shabbat is coming right now. Also have to turn off the dinger on my phone so that it doesn't keep dinging while we're together. And I'll turn off the dinger on my computer too. Okay, there we go. So I shouldn't get any notifications now. All right, so as I said, maybe we'll start with Shabbat Shalom, Bim Bam Shabbat Shalom as a way to kind of start, because we are starting Shabbat. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, cheery berry berry bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, cheery berry berry bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, cheery berry berry bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. So bim bam, always a nice way to start Shabbat, I think. So I hope that you've had a good week since we saw each other, because maybe haven't seen each other since Monday. Maybe we haven't seen each other since last Friday. Maybe it's been longer. And if you are a Mahar JCS student, hopefully I'll see you this coming Sunday, November 22nd, which is our last JCS session before Thanksgiving, and pretty close to Hanukkah, actually. So I hope you'll come, because we'll be doing a little more Hanukkah music together. And probably in your class, you'll learn a little bit about Hanukkah. So we have a lot of choices for songs. We have a lot of choices for stories. And probably when we do this next week or the week after, we'll talk a little bit more about the Hanukkah story. But today I have a story kind of about family more than anything else. And it's from, if you have an adult around, this story is from Honey on the Page, which is a collection of Yiddish language children's stories, but they're all translated into English. There's not very much Yiddish really in the book. And this story is called Evie Gets Lost. The only real bummer about this book is it doesn't have a lot of pictures. But we will do Evie Gets Lost, which isn't too long of a story. And it goes like this. Evie was a pretty little girl of 5, with a round, clear face, big, shining eyes, and curly black hair. She had already known the alphabet for a long time. Back when her mother had bought her a little booklet with pictures of boys and girls, with doggies and an oven and a window, she had used it, the beautiful new booklet, to teach herself how to read. Bat, cat, dog, egg, fan, and many other short words of a single syllable, in Yiddish and Hebrew. Evie was a happy little girl and a live wire. All day long she would make her mischief and jump around the house from room to room. Sometimes her mother went out, and Evie would stay alone in her room for a while, climb onto a chair, and crawled up onto the window ledge to watch the children playing in the courtyard. Her parents loved her very much, and they delighted at how light she was on her feet, but at the same time they also felt afraid, because she was so wild and always crept onto the windows, and oh, if anything ever would happen to her. Evie had a brother named Isaac. He was already about 8 years old and went to school. Every morning, right at 8 o'clock, after he had scrubbed his hands, face, head, and ears with soap and water and eaten breakfast, he would shoulder his book bag with his books and notebooks, button up his overcoat, take along the roll that his mother had given him for second breakfast, and head off to school. For those who've know Lord of the Rings and hobbits and things like that, second breakfast sounds like maybe Isaac is a hobbit. Isaac loved his little sister Evie, and Evie loved Isaac. Every afternoon they both played with their toys at their little white table with its 2 white chairs, which stood in a corner near the big horse that their father had bought for them. It's not a real horse, it's like a rocking horse. Sometimes they also quarreled as they played, but usually Evie was more to blame than Isaac. That's because everything Isaac had, anything she even so much as spotted him with, she wanted him to give it to her right away. If she saw that Isaac had a pencil, she would go running to their mother crying, "Why does he get a whole pencil and I just have a small piece of one?" And then she would want Isaac to give his pencil to her. That's what she did whenever she saw Isaac had received something she hadn't. But Isaac was already older, of course, so he understood that his sister was still a little girl, and he always gave in to her so she wouldn't cry. There was one matter, though, where Isaac would not give in. Evie never stopped asking him to take her along with him to school and show her the teacher and the students, the class, the desk, the classroom, the pretty pictures of birds and lions and bears and everything else Isaac had told her was there. But Isaac wouldn't take her along for anything in the world. Nor had their mother quite given permission for her to go with him, because she was still small, their mother said. She wasn't allowed to go with her brother, who was still just a little boy himself. Once Isaac was sitting at the big table doing his homework, and Evie was sitting at the little table in the corner playing by herself with her toys. She didn't want to play alone anymore at the little table, so she went up to Isaac to ask him to play with her. But Isaac wouldn't play with her because he still had homework. Evie went back to her little table and sat back down on her little chair feeling forlorn. Forlorn means kind of sad and lonely. Cradling her chin in her palms, she tilted her head sideways and trained her big, beautiful eyes sorrowfully on her brother, who was sitting at the table doing his homework. As soon as Isaac finished his homework, Evie jumped up, ran to him, and begged, "Isaac, Izzy, dear, take me along to school tomorrow. I'll give you both of the red apples that Mama gave me today." So Isaac finally agreed and promised to take her along to school the next day, and he accepted her apples. Evie was jubilant that she would be going along to school, and all afternoon until evening, both of them, Evie and Isaac, played happily. The next day, Isaac left early for school just like every other day, and Evie was still asleep. When she finally got up an hour later and saw Isaac was already gone, that he had left and gone to school by himself, she was annoyed at herself for oversleeping and angry at Isaac for not waking her. But she didn't know that Isaac was already having second thoughts and didn't want to take her along at all because he was afraid of their mother. When Isaac came home for lunch, Evie ran to him and reminded him of his promise the day before, but Isaac answered her, "I don't want to take you along anymore because you're still too little." This made Evie despondent, and she felt like crying and telling their mother on Isaac for taking both of her red apples the day before. But she felt embarrassed, so she stayed quiet, didn't cry, and didn't say anything at all. That afternoon, though, when Isaac had once again taken his book bag and gone off to school, Evie could no longer restrain herself. And quietly, so nobody would see, she ran after him. When Isaac looked and saw Evie running after him, he started to run faster so she couldn't catch up. But Evie didn't turn back. She kept running. Meanwhile, Isaac ran away until he disappeared, and Evie could no longer see him. Evie was standing there on the sidewalk, so she started looking around in every direction to see where he was. She looked and looked this way and that, but she could no longer see the house where her parents lived. She was lost, and she couldn't find the way back to Mother. She was very frightened and started to run farther, but suddenly she pulled up short and began to sob. Many, many people, men and women, adults and children, passed her. All of them stopped and asked, "Why are you crying, little girl? Why are you crying? What's your name? What are your mama and papa's names?" Though Evie hadn't stopped sobbing yet, she remembered, and she told the people her name was Evie Lillienbloom, but she didn't know the name of the street where they lived, and she couldn't stop crying. The people took pity on her, stroked her head, calmed her down. Don't cry, don't cry. We'll get you home soon to your mama." But Evie was scared of all the strangers, and she couldn't stop crying. It was already turning to dusk, and a young lady took pity on her, held her by the hand, and walked her from house to house. "Perhaps you recognize this lost child? Perhaps you know who she is, where this lost little girl is from?" But nobody recognized Evie. Then an old woman came along who had just crossed the street, and out of pity took Evie along with her and offered to keep the girl with her until they could write into the newspapers, and in that way let her parents know where she was so they could come and get her. Meanwhile, back at Evie's house, there was a great lament. Her mother, who hadn't noticed when Evie left, realized only a couple of minutes later she wasn't there and was terrified. All afternoon, Evie's father and mother had been looking for her. Throughout the house, in the courtyard, on the streets, it was dark and Evie still wasn't home. It was a terrible night for the unfortunate mother. Father, who was very upset himself, tried to comfort her, but she wouldn't allow herself to be consoled, and she cried, "Who knows what could have happened to my child in the street? Who knows?" And she cried like that until well after midnight. Isaac was devastated. He was afraid to admit that he was to blame, and he couldn't hold himself back from crying. Evie's toys stood in the corner so forlorn and abandoned, he imagined they were looking at him with fury and rage. Isaac was afraid to even look in their direction. Mother sat on a chair crying, so Isaac went up to her and snuggled his head against her knee, and hot tears ran from his eyes and fell onto their mother's dress. While Isaac and his mother were sitting there sadly bathed in tears, Father dashed out to the newspapers' offices and let them know his little daughter Evie had gotten lost. He wanted them to print a request she be brought home to such and such street and such house number and such apartment number. Early the next morning, 2 notices appeared in the newspaper right after each other. One read, "A girl of almost 6, black curly hair, named Evie Lillienbloom, wearing a short red velvet jacket and red socks and yellow shoes, is located on such a street in the care of so-and-so at such address." And the second read, "A girl of 5½ with black curly hair, wearing a short red velvet jacket with red socks and yellow shoes, by the name of Evie Lillienbloom, got lost yesterday from such street and such number. Whoever knows of her whereabouts is asked to notify her parents." Evie's father ran down early in the morning to buy the papers, and as soon as he read the first notice, he rejoiced, and he ran to tell Mother and Isaac the good news, that Evie had already been found, and then he ran to pick Evie and to thank those good people heartily for their kindness in taking his lost child into their home. When Father got there, Evie was still asleep in bed. She looked tired, and her cheeks were streaked with dried tears. For a short time, her father stood there beside the bed and gazed with compassion at the lost girl, and only after a little while did he wake her. And then he could no longer restrain himself from taking her into his arms and kissing her little lips. Waking with a start, Eva shrieked and fell into her father's arms, kissed him, and cried out through the tears, "Papa! Poppy, Papa!" Eva's father got dressed, thanked the good people. Eva's father got her dressed, thanked the good people, and took her home. What joy soon overtook the household. Evie hurled herself into her mother, and Isaac burst into tears and told the whole story of what had happened the previous day, saying, Mommy, I won't do it again. It's my fault. I let her out into the street when she wanted to run to school with me." And Isaac cried for a long time until Mother kissed him, and he and Evie covered each other with kisses too. On his mother's orders, Isaac went up to Father, kissed his hand, and begged him to forgive him for leaving his sister on the street. And from that day on, Evie and Isaac loved each other even more, and they played together every afternoon at the little table, and Evie told him so many stories about all that happened to her on that awful day. How everyone stood around her on the street asking questions, how the kind old lady had taken her home, and how she had cried for such a long time at the stranger's house. Isaac listened to the whole thing and cried tears of pity for his little sister. She had gone through so much. He kissed her and promised her from that day on he would never again leave her behind and would always take care of her. That's a sweet little story. Have you ever gotten lost? It's pretty scary if you have. You don't know where you are. You can't remember where the people you were with are. Everybody might be asking you questions. It's very, very scary. So, if that happens, it's scary for everybody. It's scary for the people who are looking for you too. So, I know you don't want to try to get lost, but it's scary when it happens. And this had a happy ending, which is good. So, that was our story for today. It was a little bit long, and a little bit teeny tiny bit sad, maybe, but it had a happy ending. So that was our song, and we're almost ready to do our Shabbat thing, but I want to make sure we do at least another Shabbat song before we get started with that. And since we read a Yiddish story, I thought maybe we would sing a Yiddish song. So we haven't done this song in a while, so you may not know it, or if you did know it, you might not remember it. And it's a song called Zol Zayin Shabbos, and it really only has 4 words. Zol, Zayin, Shabbos, and Sholem. So Zol Zayin is one phrase, and Zol Zayin means let it be. Shabbos is Shabbat in Yiddish, and Sholem is the Yiddish way to say shalom or peace. So the first verse is Zol Zayin Shabbos, let there be Shabbat, and the second verse is Zol Zayin Sholem, let there be peace. And then there's a bunch of yai bye byes in there, so you don't have to only do words the whole time. Ya ba bye, ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Ya ba bye, ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Shabbos, Shabbos, Zol Zayin, Shabbos, 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 Zol Zayin, Zol Zayin, Shabbos. Ya ba bye, bim bam, ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam, ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Sholem, Sholem, Zol Zayin, Sholem, 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 Zol Zayin, Zol Zayin, Sholem. Ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Shabbos, Shabbos, Zol Zayin, Shabbos, 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 Zol Zayin, Zol Zayin, Shabbos. Ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam, bim bam. Ya ba bye, bim bam bam. So that's a pretty easy song, right? It doesn't have a lot of words. And we'll do that a few more weeks every so often. But since we did a pretty long Yiddish story, I thought maybe we would do a pretty long Yiddish song. So we've done 2 songs, a story. We talked a little bit about Hanukkah is coming, and we talked a lot about how Thanksgiving is coming. So, something to remember about Thanksgiving. And I know probably you learned a little bit about this in school. We celebrate Thanksgiving because we remember a particular story about how people came to the United States before it was the United States. We're told a particular story, and we remember that story. But the other side of that story is the Pilgrims actually weren't so nice to the Native Americans who lived near them, and our country has not at all done a very good job of treating Native Americans fairly. And so part of our job on Thanksgiving is we should be grateful for what we have. We should also remember that a lot of what we have because other people have done the work, other people have suffered for it, other people have lost what they had, and that's part of how we got what we have. So this Thanksgiving, a thing that maybe you and your adults can do is figure out what Native American tribes and Native American nations lived on the land that you now live on. And there are all kinds of places on the internet where you can Google it and find who lived in this area, who lived in that area. And a lot of us lived in places where the Piscataway Indians were or something like that. So it's worth finding that out. And as part of Thanksgiving, not just being thankful for what we have, but recognizing that we have what we have because other people have suffered and lost what they had. And that means that we have an obligation, it's our job, to figure out how to make that right. Because if we don't figure out how to make that right, it means that we're happy that other people have lost and we get to keep what we have. And they're stuck without what they need. So, I hope that you'll think about doing that this Thanksgiving with your family. It's also time to do our little Shabbat ceremony. So, I've got my little wooden plate, my little wooden challahs, my other one, my little wooden candles and candlesticks, my little wooden Kiddush cup, my little wooden wine bottle, and my little wooden knife that doesn't cut anything that goes with the little wooden challah that you can't cut. I guess you could cut it with a saw, but I'm not going to do that. So, it's time for us to do our little Shabbat with our blessings. So, we have our candles. Nivarech et haor ba'olam, nivarech et haor ba'adam, nivarech et haor shel Shabbat. Let us bless the light in the world. Let us bless the light in humanity. Let us bless the light of Shabbat. And if you have something that you can use to drink, or if you even have a grape hanging around, or some pumpkin seeds, because pumpkins grow on vines. Nivarech et borei pri hagafen, let us bless those who create the fruit of the vine. And then if you have crackers or bread or something like that hanging around, we can say our blessing over bread. The blessing over challah and the blessing over bread are the same. Nivarech et hamotziim lechem min haaretz, let us bless those who bring forth bread from the earth. And those are our Shabbat blessings and our Shabbat stuff. So we're getting close to 25 minutes. This is pretty long for us today. That story was pretty long. And it was important for us to talk about Thanksgiving a little bit. So we have time, if you'll stick around, for one more song. And we did this song last week to end our Shabbat. So we did a song called Haida. And Haida goes fast and Haida goes slow, and it has one word, Haida. So let's do Haida one more time. As I know during the summer when we did Haida, people really like doing Haida. So we'll do Haida again tonight. Haida, Haida, Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, 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 Haida-dee-Haida, Haida, Haida, Haida. I hope you have a Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbat, and I hope I'll see you on Sunday if you're one of our JCS students here at Mahar, and if not, I hope I'll see you again soon some other time out there on the internet. Bye.